Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Sarat. At the close of the Second World War, hundreds of top Nazi scientists, military and intelligence officers were spirited out of Germany and into the United States at the behest of U.S. President Harry Truman. Ostensibly, the intent of this covert recruiting of Nazis, known as Operation Paperclip, was to give the U.S. an upper hand over their new Cold War enemy, the Soviet Union. The Nazi rocket scientists, including Wernher von Braun, would later help the Americans win the space race and put a man on the moon ahead of the Soviets. Hitler's top spy on the Eastern Front, Reinhard Gehlen, would become part of the newly formed CIA. But did these and other Nazis remain loyal to their fascist, racist ideology? Did these Nazis, in fact, assume positions of power and influence inside the United States? Is their influence still felt today? On this episode of The Conspiracy Show, we'll investigate the claims of several researchers, including a New York Times best-selling author and a media scientist, who contend the Nazis didn't really lose the war, they simply moved their base of operation. We'll also meet a skeptic who insists the exfiltration of Nazi scientists and intelligence officers into the United States was morally questionable, but a necessary evil during the Cold War. Me, I just want the truth, and I'm willing to follow it wherever it leads. It is time to redefine reality. Genetic enigma or a human alien hybrid? That's how cynical I am now about the process. Extremism, technology, culture, weather patterns are created by they're going to make it. Has been engineered by the Illuminati.
There's no doubt.
I'm here with Joseph Farrell, author of Nazi International, the Nazis' post-war plans to control finance, conflict, physics, and space. Joseph, welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Was Hitler and the Third Reich a creation of the West?
I think to a great extent. You have, of course, the infamous and well-known connections between the Bush family, but there are other connections, certainly, between American business and the big Nazi cartel. You have Rockefeller connections with them, you have DuPont, you have Morgan. All of these big banking houses are intimately connected. Ford Motor, they did business with Nazi Germany, as did Standard Oil, all throughout the war.
There's a lot more going on behind the scenes when you start to look at the documents.
Who funded Hitler?
In 1942, the United States, under the Trading with the Enemy Act, pointed to Prescott Bush, Averell Harriman, and the Brown Harriman Bank. They seized the bank for financing more than 90% of Germany's war production.
The United States government actually prosecuted Prescott Bush, a very powerful senator, for being nothing but a financial frontman for Hitler and the Nazis.
America was doing a great deal of business, and I suppose you could say had a great deal of sympathy for Germany up to a point.
Prescott Bush was charged under the Trading with the Enemies Act, helping to fund the Nazi war machine, for profit, obviously. What does that say? Should we be concerned about that chapter in American history?
What was the most popular youth organization in America after the Boy Scouts? The Jungsbund, the German equivalent of the Boy Scouts.
If you look at the overall picture of what's going on in history at the time, the same groups are behind putting in the Bolsheviks into power in the Soviet Union.
Before the war, the largest lender of money to the Nazi government was City National Bank, which is now Citicorp.
Was Prescott Bush funding the Nazis? Oh, absolutely. We've got extensive documentation to that. We have Prescott Bush's own testimony. And so would I accuse Prescott Bush of being aware of the Holocaust? Would I accuse Prescott Bush of being aware of the Blitz, the bombing of London? Probably not.
What about the theory that Hitler was essentially a creation of the Western intelligence, British intelligence, in order to provide a bulwark against communism?
I think it's incredibly hard for people to envision a Hitler or a Stalin and the lengths that they will go to gain and to maintain personal power.
I'd say that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than they understand. The average person believes that history happens by accident, but the upper echelons know that history is planned.
Why would they create and unleash such a monster?
In order to keep division in Europe, in order to keep a war in Europe, it would make America and Britain strong.
The problem was, of course, Hitler didn't play by the rules, so things got a little out of hand.
There were no Americans or Western powers involved in the beer hall putsch. There were no Americans or Brits involved in his winning more than 90% of the popular vote after a successful term as Vice Chancellor. There were no Americans or Brits making him a World War I trench messenger and war hero, awarded the Iron Cross for conspicuous merit, and he was a war hero.
Greg Hallett, in his book Hitler Was a British Agent, shows definitive, well-documented proof that Hitler and Churchill both attended Tavistock's Psychological Warfare Division in 1911 and were classmates.
I learned in high school that the Allies won the Second World War and we vanquished the Nazis on the battlefield. Are you telling me that that's not correct?
That's not entirely correct. We beat the Germans. And at that schoolhouse in Reims in 1945, the German military surrendered. But if you stop and check it out, you'll find there were no Nazis represented there. The Nazis never surrendered.
You don't find any representative of the government of the Third Reich, and you certainly don't find any representative signing on behalf of the Nazi Party. When they had the opportunity and leaders of the Nazi Party gathered, they could have had them sign a statement during the surrender that the Nazi Party is a criminal organization and we hereby abolish its existence. All of this was lost.
Technically true. Practically, it doesn't matter. Are we still engaged in the Civil War in this country because Lee is the one who surrendered and not Jefferson Davis at that time at Appomattox? Of course not. Hitler committed suicide rather than surrendered. Practically speaking, the war was over.
What was Operation Paperclip?
Operation Paperclip was an operation out of the Vatican using the Vatican network of churches to move all the high-level Nazi Waffen-SS men out of Germany, away from the Nuremberg trials, into the United States and to safety in other parts of the world.
Paperclip was a program where they were bringing in these Nazi scientists, again, not only the rocket scientists, but biochemical warfare, mind control, psychiatrists, all kinds of people they brought in. The thinking at that time was, now we're facing the Soviet Union, and we really need these guys because we need the technology and we need their knowledge.
We were desperate, really, for technology which we thought would offset the Soviet numerical preponderance.
All of Hitler's top generals were given senior positions in the American government. Fritz Kramer in the Pentagon, Reinhard Gehlen at the CIA, von Braun at NASA, and Dr. Mengele, the angel of death, at China Lake, California, experimenting with a Cray computer and electron microscope.
Reinhard Gehlen was the general in charge of Army's Group's intelligence in the East, and he came and cut a deal with the United States government. He said, you guys are now facing the Russians, and they've been infiltrating people in the United States since the Russian Revolution, and you guys don't know anything about what's going on in Russia.
It's basically known now that Gehlen deliberately overestimated those capabilities and intentions precisely to get the United States and the Soviet Union into an arms race. So it was, it was very much all a part of their long-range strategic thinking after the war.
And so no wonder we had a Cold War, because everything we knew in the immediate aftermath of World War II about the Russians' objectives and agendas and whatever they planned to do was coming from an anti-communist underground in Russia filtered through a Nazi organization.
What nominal rank did he hold within the Pentagon? If he was there, we'd know. The Pentagon isn't filled with civilians. He'd have to have a pay grade, he'd have to hold a rank. Congress would have to review his promotional dossier.
This is one of the more disturbing aspects of this story. If you look at the structure of command that they had over at Peenemünde inside the Third Reich, you'll find that they duplicate that exact structure inside of NASA in the United States after World War II. So in other words, their influence inside of NASA at a certain period of its history, particularly during the Apollo era, was very, very influential. It was very significant.
Well, Wernher von Braun helped build our space program. Certainly, a number of the scientists wound up at Los Alamos. It's not like they had any particular love for the Soviets, and so it was very doubtful any of them would be off selling secrets, and their scientific knowledge was valuable. In the coldest possible terms, they were simply too valuable to lose to Nuremberg.
You can find Nazis in the Pentagon, you can find them in the CIA, you can find them in NASA, you can find them in the American defense industry. They're all over the place, and of course down in Latin America doing their thing.
Joseph Mengele, long rumored to have escaped to South America, where eventually he was found washed up on a beach somewhere. What can you tell me about Mengele?
Well, Dr. Mengele, of course, was known as the angel of death. He did lots of really bizarre experiments. He would take people and put them in freezing water and see how long it took them to freeze. Really horrific things.
Mengele would have been hanged for his war crimes. Did Mengele escape? Yes. Did he enter the United States? There's certainly no record of it. I credit that it's possible, but I very much doubt that would be with the knowledge of anyone associated with the United States government, be it the intelligence community or the government. If anyone, the medical community would have reported him.
The story is that they found his body somewhere. But let me point out, taking bodies and working on their teeth to where the teeth would match up, that was a common practice with the Nazi hierarchy and high-ranking SS people.
It's apparent, or at least strongly suggested, that these post-war Nazis are continuing their research projects, and I would aver doing so more or less independently of any of the Allied powers that won World War II. So in other words, you're looking at the activity of a post-war extraterritorial Nazi state of some sort.
In 1985, many people were stunned when President Reagan visited a cemetery in Bitburg, Germany, and laid a wreath where some 2,000 German soldiers were buried, members of the Waffen-SS, which was the combat arm of the SS. And this was a paramilitary organization that helped run the Nazi extermination camps, and they committed, many other atrocities, including the murder of American POWs. Why on earth did Reagan go to Bitburg?
The fact that Ronald Reagan was sent to Bitburg to worship and lay a wreath at the Waffen-SS tomb shows the power of the Fourth Reich in the United States.
Why did Reagan do that? Horrible, horrible advice from someone on his staff.
That is a very, very crucial part of the story.
At Bitburg was buried only Waffen-SS. They were Fritz Kramer's troops.
Who exactly was Fritz Kramer?
Fritz Kramer was Hitler's master general at the Bulge.
Fritz Kramer was one of the SS men who then ended up over in the United States and moved around in U.S. military circles.
Was it Kramer that ordered Reagan to lay a wreath at the Bitburg Cemetery?
Obviously, somebody with a lot of power ordered Reagan to lay the wreath at Bitburg because when that was announced he was going to do that, that caused quite a turmoil, particularly among veterans organizations and among Jewish organizations, but he did it anyway.
Given the evil empire speech, given Reagan's and the United States' antipathy towards Soviet Russia, I honestly can only assume that he felt it showed forgiveness for the current generation of German people. We don't blame you for what your fathers or your grandfathers did. That's my best guess.
Obviously, there was somebody with a lot of clout that got him to do that.
Well, we should be worried because Nazism, we have to remember, is an ideology that was midwifed into existence prior to World War II by German secret societies. In other words, it's the ideology that persists. And if you're creating as I believe that they did, if you're creating a kind of a post-war international fascista or international Nazi movement, this means that the ideology itself is going to be propagated. So it's not necessarily even the personnel we have to look at. We have to look at the persistence of the ideas. And I think that you can find those ideas very much in evidence in Western culture right now.
When you get their technology, you also get their philosophy. And this is how National Socialism wormed its way into the American political system.
Is this going to culminate in the Nazis taking over the entire world? Is there, for example, a Fuhrer waiting behind the scenes who will emerge onto the world scene?
Through the George W. Bush administration, with the false flag operation of 9/11 being the foundation, the starting point, they begin to dismantle the Constitution. They begin to create the Department of Homeland Security, which sounds suspiciously like the Gestapo, you know. I mean, they're laying down the same method of operation as the Nazis did to control the population in Europe.
You've got an increasing kind of a police state snitch culture going on in this country. You've got cameras on every intersection, you've got cameras in public places, not as bad as in Great Britain, but it's getting there. Within the United States, you've got a corporate culture that has basically so interwoven itself with the government. In other words, we're dealing with President Eisenhower's old military-industrial complex, but you've got a corporate culture and a government culture where the government is no longer really looking out for the public good, it's looking out for the corporate good. And that, by definition, is fascism, because this is exactly what Mussolini set up, this is exactly what Adolf Hitler set up inside of Nazi Germany.
Well, how can skinhead organizations not concern you? How can the Aryan nation here in the United States not concern you? Are they an organized military? Are they an elected government? They are not. Do they have the same sociopathic, racist, ideological aims as the Third Reich? A number of them do. And of course, that's very concerning. Should they get organized, and should they somehow slide into political power, that would be concerning.
If you find them infiltrating themselves into positions of senior management within various defense corporations, the most famous example, of course, being General Walter Dornberger, who becomes a vice president at Bell Helicopter. So, you know, take that and multiply it several times throughout the American defense community. And you've got a real infiltration of key corporations and key agencies inside the United States.
The Nazis never surrendered. They just moved everything out of Europe. They sent out their patents, their copyrights, their, you know, gold, silver, paintings, artwork. They're still trying to get a lot of that back, right? And where did most of them go? Well, a lot of them went to South America, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile. A lot of them went to Egypt, but a bulk of them came to the United States.
The Fourth Reich now is been resurrected. We have, when you look at the history of the United States, from the Korean to the Vietnam War to what's going on in Afghanistan, 9/11, the lies that there was weapons of mass destruction, it's all Nazi-type tactics that they're using.
More than 65 years after we supposedly defeated as evil an ideology the world has ever known, there appears to be at least some credible evidence that a number of ranking Nazis were able to assume positions of authority and power inside the US government, military, and military-industrial complex. There also appears to be substantial evidence that Hitler was heavily financed by US bankers and industrialists, including the grandfather and father of two future US presidents. And it appears that the surviving Nazis used their considerable war plunder obtained by looting much of Europe to create huge corporate front companies around the world, including the United States. The question is, did the nearly 2,000 Nazi scientists and intelligence officers and other officials smuggled into the US after the war under Operation Paperclip bring their evil philosophy of National Socialism to America and create, as Jim Marrs calls it, a new empire, or Fourth Reich? And now, I'd like to know what you think. You can contact me here at The Conspiracy Show through our website, www.theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid.